Welcome to our audience and welcome to our expert panel. My name is Katharina Puroka. I am head of the management school at the Continuing Education Center at TU Wien. And it is my pleasure to give you a warm welcome to our online talk this afternoon. We are very excited about the panel that is here with us this afternoon, who will share their insights with us and who will be discussing the consequences of the corona crisis on the automotive and supply industry. Just before we get started with the discussion, I would like to very briefly introduce our organization to you for those of you who are less familiar with who we are. So the Continuing Education Center has been the TU Wien's central institution for professional and postgraduate education for more than 15 years now. We offer various programs in the field of technology, construction, and real estate on the one hand, but also many different programs in the field of management and leadership, from short programs to seminars to full MBA programs. And one of our MBA programs is the reason why we are here today, our Professional MBA Automotive Industry. Altogether, we have roughly about 500 students every year who study with us from all over the world. Around 90 nations are represented among our student body, and we count more than 2,000 alumni. And in all our programs, it's always very important to us to have scientific findings and scientific research in our teaching, but also applied and practical know-how. To this purpose, we regularly organize business evenings or panel discussions with distinguished guest speakers from the industry. Meetings that are arranged for our students, for our alumni, but also to other interested persons. And today we are very excited to actually host our first online expert talk. Due to the corona crisis, we cannot carry it out on site at TU Wien as we usually do, but virtually, and I hope that before we start, our last technical problems will be solved. So thank you, all of you, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you first and foremost to our experts who take their time this afternoon to share their insights with us. I wish all of you and all of us a very interesting afternoon, an interesting discussion. And I will hand over to Professor Sien, the Academic Director of our Professional MBA Automotive Industry.
Thank you very much, Ms. Puroka. Also a warm welcome from my side. We have just now 90 participants. We have a list of around 150 interested people who are interested in our expert talk, so there will be maybe some more. And once again, to have a stable connection, it's necessary that you, the participants, mute your microphone and shut down your video system because of so much participants. So please stop your system so we can see what we are presenting to you. And if you have the consequences if we don't mute our microphone. At the end of our expert talk, we will have a question and answer session. So if you have questions, and hopefully you have many questions, please fill out it in the chat room. Dr. Hahn will collect it and then we'll present it to our speakers at the end of our session. As you have heard, my name is Wilfried Sien. I'm the academic director together with Professor Lesinski. We have many participants which are former students from our MBA. Warm welcome to all of you. I'm proud to have you here. We have three panelists here, which give us a short statement of around 10 minutes, and then we will go in the discussion. The panelists are, in a short way, we have Professor Tostmann, board member of Volkswagen, responsible for production and logistics. We have Diplom Engineer Dietmar Schäfer, CEO of EC Automotive Holding here in Austria. And we have Diplom Engineer Marco Schlimpert, Senior Vice President, Marketing, Sales, Operations in Europe and in Americas at Lenzing. That are our three panelists. And we only have 60 minutes, so let's start with the first statement of Professor Tostmann. Andreas, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Wilfried. Welcome everybody. For me, it's a pleasure to speak here and give you some insights of what we did within Corona and what we are currently doing. And it's very turbulent, the times, I think, for everybody. When I look a little bit back, then I remember it was a Sunday evening when all of a sudden we, as a board, communicated and we spoke about that we have to close the plants and shut down everything. And then 2 days later, on the 17th of March, we exactly started with this ramp down of our production plants in Germany. And then globally, outside China as well. Outside China, because China was ahead of us. So they did the exercise before it came to Germany and to Europe. And what we did in this first step was really that with production amongst 16 big production sites, we stopped, I always say, in the full run. So within 48 hours, we came to a complete standstill. And that was a completely new dimension for us, because normally we prepare the summer shutdown for a month. Everybody knows we are going on vacation. Or if we have a crisis situation where a supplier burned down, we have a plan B to bring the material in. If there is a finance crisis somewhere in the world, we see this early enough, the demand drops down, we can react. But with this, it was completely in different dimensions and different to that. So therefore, in the full run, we had to stop what we did. And I think we had in the peak time 80,000 people working in short time. In Germany only. So that was a huge dimension, what we had to handle. For the plants in Europe, it took 6 weeks. For the production sites in South America, it took 10 weeks. And for the production site in Mexico, I must say it takes 11 weeks, because they start tomorrow again after 11 weeks of shutdown. And this is, will have a huge impact on the financial side as well. The question was then, how did we restart? The restart was a step-by-step approach, started then in April. Health for the employees and for everybody was first priority. And we had to bring back the supplier network, the logistics partners, and all the stakeholders back to business. And we also had to coordinate a lot of our internal departments on a daily basis to bring everything and all the parts and goods back into the plants. I said this, health of our employees is first priority, still was first priority. So we had to implement a plan of 100 measures, 100 points for health protection. What we worked out within less than a week, I would say. we got some information from China, and then some experts from health department, from logistics, from production, from HR. They worked together, worked out this plan, and it became a bit of a German industry standard. This plan, I think we have meanwhile 120,000 downloads of this 100-point plan. And when you look at this chart, for example, you see relatively easy ideas just to separate the people, have the right distance amongst them. I always say this is not rocket science, just very easy things, but they needed to be implemented, and what we did in a very short time. As I said, all the employees and also the suppliers, they shared these ideas, and at the end we have more than 120,000 downloads from our webpage for this idea. I think it worked. Coming back to the ramp up was very successful. There was not a single part missing. Imagine that we stopped within 48 hours and we had to bring just for the normal operation from 8,000 different locations the parts into the European plants. When you look at our headquarters here in Wolfsburg, we have roughly 3,000 suppliers in 70 countries, and they deliver on a daily basis more than 20,000 parts. That means we have 2,500 trucks, and 100 trains are coming in, and also then with the finished cars, we have a lot of trains leaving this factory. So that was also successful. What could we learn from this crisis? I think everybody is now experienced in video conferences. They are most of the time highly efficient. We did the same and took this out. Sometimes I must say, meanwhile, I missed the personal contact. There are people speaking to me I've never seen. I have no picture of these people, and it's really hard to develop talented people now when you just talk to a machine the whole day and you do not have the feeling really what's behind this, the voice you hear. That's one thing, and the other side, and that I think comes with the next picture, we used the time where we didn't produce to continue in our work on the innovation side and also the work into digital solutions. We are developing, we believe it's the biggest industrial cloud now for the Volkswagen Group. It's, as I said, world's largest project of this kind, where we want to connect several 100,000 machines in the different plants to get the data from. That is a decided project that runs already, and we are in the process that we started here in our main factory in Wolfsburg, but as well in other factories around the world, and we kept full speed on this just to get the productivity which we want to have out of this, to get this pretty fast. The productivity is that what we need, and we need this probably faster than original planned, just to compensate for all the losses during the lockdown and the shutdown. And that brings me to the last part of my small talk is, was it successful? What do we see now? And the biggest question is really how fast will the markets recover? You see this in this chart here, for example, in China, there was just a V-shaped crisis. The line indicates the volume, the sales. So they are more or less back to where they were before. For North American region, You see it's more an L shape. It will take until the last quarter of this year before they are coming back. Right bottom, you see South American region. It's also more in U shape, and they will be on a in the second half of the year on a by far lower level compared to the times before Corona. And for Europe, we hopefully see some kind of a U, and that it then come back pretty fast, hopefully, because that's what we need. We had some losses of 25 to 35% on a monthly base, which we have to recover. And I had a look at the study from Capgemini. They asked the people, do you really consider buying a car? And in China, 61% of the people said yes. In India, 57. These are huge markets. In Italy, it was 43, Spain, 36, and in Germany, it was only 25. And the German market, which is our home market, is the biggest market in Europe. So therefore, you see that there is a bit of a concern that we are heading into a huge recession. It doesn't feel like this because nobody is really, there are people that are sick, but most of the people are in the business are not sick. And it feels quite okay. And when you look at the stock exchange, for example, it also looks okay. There's a big volatility in the market. But when you look at this chart, there's a bit of a fear that after the Corona crisis, we say now comes the recession, which is then the crisis only in one dimension, market demand driven. And this is necessary to avoid. And therefore, I'm very happy that we have stimulus packages from different countries. France, Germany, for example, they lower the VAT by 3% from the 1st July until the end of the year. And when you look at the different programs, I know the German program is a 52-point program. I see for all the different sectors stimulus in this, which is needed. The question for sure is an open, how can we finance this? But this will take them a little bit longer. I personally believe, and that's my closing, that we need something really to avoid a huge recession. And therefore, first focus must really be on the market, on the economy, to stabilize it and to bring it back where it was before the COVID-19 virus attacked us, so to say. And that's from my side. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Andreas. I think there will be a lot of questions to you coming up. Now we are leaving the world of the big ones, of the OEMs, coming to the supply industry. A warm welcome again to Mr. Schäfer. As I said, he is CEO of a typical automotive supplier since many years, and he is also chairman of the Austrian Working Group on Automotive Supply Industry at the Chamber of Commerce. So he's a spokesman of the supply industry here in Austria with more than 900 members. So we are very happy to have you here. Mr. Schäfer, the stage is yours.
Well, Mr. Seen, thank you for the kind introduction, and I'm more than happy to join today. And as well to, let's say, I think we have a good panel today, and I just can support what we heard from colleague Mr. Tostmann from Volkswagen, who is actually as well one of our biggest customers. And we are one part of his supply chain where he needs to rely on. But let's have a look at the market situation today and how it looks like. I brought some let's say IHS numbers in comparison, let's say from the forecasts before COVID-19, the last ones in 2020 in January, and the latest ones from June. And here we see, if we compare the January and the June, we easily see that on a global basis, we will have a reduction of almost 20 million cars, which will not be built this year, according to these forecast data. Or let's say we talk in total about 23% of the global car manufacturing volume. And this shows what significant effect all these, let's say, countermeasures to the pandemic virus spread brings to our industry. If we look a little bit into the future, and of course it's forecast data and they are volatile as well these days, we see that from today's point of view, at least based on the IHS data, we will reach the 2019 volume again around in 2023. That's actually in 3 years from now, and that's a long time to come back to a level that we used to have last year. And if we look for the period of 5 years up until 25, this means we will lose another 45 million cars compared to what we had planned at the end of last year. And this does not mean just alone, just the car manufacturers. This means the global supply chains, all the tiers involved. And you can imagine what dramatical impact in every financial planning of the supply chain this means. So whatever is going on, whatever is under discussion, we always need to take this into account. And let's say, judge our opinion with our opinion on that, and keep it in mind. Can you switch to the next slide, please? I just put some statements into the slides and what we learned until now. And this is not just as an exemplary. We heard before. We never saw such situation as we did mid of March before in our business lives. I think all of us share the situation, and I can say we have not really been prepared for that. As a, let's say, let me tell you, we heard before, Volkswagen decided within days or hours in shutdown scenarios of their plants. We in the Tier 1 business, we got our schedules and our demands through the newspapers. For example, the planning department of our customers have not been able to be quicker in information than the media. So the shutdowns have arrived earlier through the media channels than to our customers. That's a unique situation. We never had that before, and this was interesting to grab information where you can get it. The next thing is in disrupting industrial production. There's one point, but the not synchronized national lockdowns. This was another big issue. For example, we cannot build cars or keep the supply chain open if, for example, it's northern Italy is locked down and industrial production is blocked and everything else is healthy. So this the synchronization and the pandemic approach sweeping all over the world made it much more, let's say, challenging to keep everything running for all of us in the automotive industry. An interesting thing was what we realized, the China issue. We had the lockdown in China during spring break and the first half until end of February and coming slowly back until end of February. And everybody was afraid that we would get hurt and short with parts coming from China. And the scheduled effects have been end of March. What we did not know at that time is that we don't need parts at that time because we were locked down. So the China effect did mostly or not happen in that way that we've been afraid of during February this year. Again, the synchronization in the supply chains with such a pandemic approach, a very big issue. In general, what I see from many discussions with customers and colleagues from the industry, that the reconsideration in the global supply chains is taking place. And this is not just for, let's say, trade issues that we see in North America with the USMCA, what is better understood to be not that too, where we have as well some, let's say, localization effect. The risk reconsideration after this pandemic will be, let's say, in a little bit more open discussion, even though I don't see today that anybody will pay a premium for local supply chains. So we need to develop strategies in keeping cost effectiveness within, let's say, maybe shorter and less global supply chains in the future. Since I showed you before that we suffer under, let's say, a downwards adjustment of sales this year of 23%. That's really, really heavy, and this means that all the industry will have a significant negative impact in the balance sheets for the next future. And this means for all the automotive industries along the supply chains. And that's going to be interesting how this will end up. I will have another statement to that on my next slide. But what go back, please. One issue, what I really want to say as well, what I was very critical on personally was, let's say, a too long discussion on stimulation and buyer's premiums in Germany, since we lost the point of sales in April. So everybody, the headlines what we saw, the sales were going back significant. In April, this is not a big wonder, because if we don't have a point of sale where cars can be sold, there will not be anything. But then they open up, and we discuss for 6 weeks on stimulus programs. Then nobody goes to buy a car either, because they wait what's coming out and what they can take personally out of that. So this was disappointing from my point of view, and I would like to address this to any political party who is maybe joining today. What we need to consider for the time ahead, and I need to rush what I see with the time. First of all, next slide, please. The question for me is, how long and how intense will COVID-19 have an ongoing impact into our supply chains? While tremendous efforts are done in order to develop vaccination, but it's not here yet. And to be honest, I'm very much afraid of partial lockdowns wherever it happens on this world, and we get in the next period of trouble again. The next question as well on the consumers, how will the COVID-19 demand of India change the demand of individual mobility? So we saw in China, there are some trends that people don't want to have public transports anymore and want their own car. And this is one of the reasons why Chinese market recovered very good for us. How will this be in the other regions of the world? I have no idea today. I have no good data on that, but it's going to be interesting to see that. And how will the foreseeable crisis-related acceleration of digital transformation and change to more sustainable mobility technologies affect the automotive? So this will be as well, there will be an effect that we cannot really foresee on its impact into our industry today. And last but not least, how will the financial border conditions for the industry look like down the road and during recession, what is unfortunately foreseeable, especially after 2020, when the first 8 measures of the national governments are behind, and we need to talk about, let's say, a new system of financing in the industry, and that's going to be the next challenge that's coming up. So let me close my statements. COVID-19, we've been in a change of mobility, we've been in a change of the industry, hard enough and really challenging time. And now we got the crisis on top, accelerating a lot of effects that we've been in transformation before. But really impacting into all industries and all parts of the supply chain. So that's really a tough time, and I look forward to maybe see some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schäfer. Our next speaker is Mr. Schlimpert. He's Senior Vice President at Lenzing. Lenzing is a bigger company here in Austria producing fiber products in different styles, also for the automotive industry. And he's responsible for sales and marketing. His original background is in purchasing. For example, he was a director of global purchasing at Engel Austria. And he is, since many years, lecturer at our automotive industry MBA. So, Mr. Schlimpert.
Thank you very much, Professor Steen, for your kind introduction. Thank you very much, Mr. Tostmann and Mr. Schäfer, for your insight. I would like to talk about the topic how partnerships and cooperations along the value chains have been impacted through the COVID-19 crisis. What we have seen, if you look on the next page, please, what we have seen is that traditional supply and demand power partnership and relation between companies needs to be changed into a way of how to understand and create mutual understanding in companies. And the basis for that is emotional leadership. On the next page, I would like to show you what is very important for the future. We always have focused on system, processes, and cost in the relationship of companies between value chains or along the value chain. What we need to do is also to address the mindset of the people working in those companies, but also in looking at the purpose. And this requires emotional intelligent leadership. Both of that will drive actions and will drive success. What does it mean in concrete terms? I would like to show you on the next page of how this can be done. Nowadays, it's very important to adapt and to be agile on the market. So what we need to understand is how our partners are working in terms of organizational agility, on the one hand. On the other hand, we need to look at the financial resilience. And if you look at both factors, you can then distinguish between companies who are disruptive on the market. These are mainly those companies with high organizational agility and high financial resilience. They have they have enough financial reserves in order to adopt and to adjust to the market needs and even create new markets. If companies have a little bit lower financial resilience, means lower cash levels, they are currently in the explorative mode. They explore and they need to drive efficiency and performance. And then for sure, there's also companies on the market which have low organizational agility. They tend to survive and to preserve. Hard restructuring and cost optimization is now the game or the most important part at the moment. As a customer or as a supplier, you need to look at the value chain in these terms in order to be able to transform the partnerships you're working with. On the one hand, you need to be very careful that the supply still is secured, especially for those companies who are not very agile on the market. Be mindful that cost-cutting exercises might impact the value chain. And for this, you need to build up a very robust supplier basis. But for all the other companies and also for your company, if you want to seize new market opportunities, purpose is the new strategy. Especially people working for those companies are looking for the purpose, and you need to drive the partnership based upon this, and as well on the basis of trust in order to be able to seize market opportunities. This is the lessons learned we have learned during the past few months in this pandemic crisis, which is very important to understand is also we need to be much more agile in terms of how we market our products and how we can support our customers in the ramp up in the production lines. I would like to give you two concrete examples on that. The first example you see on the next page. Please go one page further. I will come to this one later. Is the cooperation between Lenzing and Rinspeed. Rinspeed is a Swiss company looking at mobility concepts. It's not that the cars will be, as of our opinion, the future. It's more the mobility concept for people living in cities. And this is a concept car where you can both transport passengers, but also transport cargoes and goods. Especially when you look at your car, how often do you use your car? You go to work, then you come back from work. In the meantime, the car is parked in the parking lot. With this new concept, there's a possibility to get the efficient use of the vehicle also by using this car in a different way. And we're very proud that Lenzing was part of this concept together with Rinspeed and other renowned companies to offer a new model for the future. What is important to do that, and please now go to the previous page again, is in leadership and also cooperation to be adaptable in the world. And that's the reason why I use the acronym ADAPT, and adapt to be successful in this ever-changing world. And this world is changing in a pace we have never seen before. Old technologies will be replaced by new ones. There is still the discussion which kind of drive technology will be the future. There is some people saying it's hydrogen, others will say it's electric car. We don't know at the moment, but what we know is we can create the future by adapting. And what do I mean? The first thing is we need to anticipate. We need to sense the market development and do quick and educated judgments. We need to drive all our initiatives by energizing people, putting the right people at the right place, giving the people purpose, not only creating a good working environment, but also creating a working environment where the people feel passionate and where they can be optimistic for the future. We also need to accelerate, and accelerating means please mind the gap. We don't need to look for the 100% solution, but what we need to do is to do quick prototyping and focus on execution. And very important, you cannot do that alone. You need to do that with partners. Partner up, connect across different functions across the company, but also across the value chain. Align on the purpose between the companies, try to find the best fit, and choose the right partner based upon the metrics I was describing before. Because this gives you time to market, faster time to market, and will be the basis for the future success. I believe that the business we have done in the past won't be the same in future. So this, especially partnering up with the companies along the value chain, will be a very important thing. And then for sure, trust. Trust is not something which is given. Trust is something which you need to build up. But in the beginning, you need to provide trust, and this helps you to integrate and embrace the diverging perspectives to create the best solutions for your value chain. And please create a safe environment where you can make mistakes and learn out of the mistakes. And there is, it's very important to act as a role model. And I believe every company needs to do that in order to be able to do business with other companies, because there's a lot of companies having now a lot of stress in terms of financing, but also in terms of how their value chains are working. Lenzing has seen this during the past 4 or 5 months. We have seen that when we delivered our product into the automotive industry, but we also have seen the rising demand for facial masks. And for these reasons, in our core competency of fiber production, we decided to partner up with Palmers and create hygiene Austria. Within a very short period of time, we were ramping up facial mask productions up to several millions per week, where we supply facial masks made in Austria to customers and to the government in Austria, but also to institutions in Austria and in Germany. And this is the only way where we believe to be able to be successful, to adapt in this VUCA world. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schlimbert. Sorry again for the bad connectivity. There was a question from one participant. Yes, you will get all the slides you have seen. Dr. Hahn will send it to you, so you will have the presentations and you can have a look in quiet what's on the slides. There are a lot of questions, and I will start with one question from Mr. Popov from Mexico. He asked Mr. Tostmann, does already Volkswagen plan to change supply chain management dramatically with deglobalization tendencies? And there are many other questions regarding this. Localization is the new word, more local buying and not only looking overseas. Andreas.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think this is a question which I was asked a couple of times already, and I think the answer is a different one in two directions. One direction is what happens globally before COVID, and we see, for example, in the US that they protect their markets from Mexico. We have to deal with this. We have to deal with additional costs. These are some trends which we saw before COVID already. And then the second part is the COVID impact. Is there really an impact on the supply chain from this? I must say I doubt it. And I think also it would be wrong if we change now our supply network tremendously after COVID. COVID was an infection. This can happen every 100 to 1,000 years. That's what I've learned. And I do not think that we can plan with such a pandemic properly. When this occurs, we have to go into crisis management mode, and we have to make the best out of it. So therefore, to cut the long story short, yes, there are some ideas of changing the supply network, but the biggest impact does not come from COVID.
Okay, thanks. There is a question to Mr. Schäfer. Are you considering scenarios to tackle the different challenges you mentioned? For instance, are you considering new business models?
Well, we are not in the role for the business models, to be honest, since the type of cars manufactured that's given, let's say, done by our customers. For us, in our specific role, we are in the field of passive safety. So actually, if we talk about electrical cars or let's say gasoline-driven cars, this doesn't make a difference for us. So at that question, we are, let's say, in a very nice area of the market. These points under considerations are the questions we are dealing with today and going to be prepared for that. That's clear. But nobody knows where it ends. That's why I put it in, because it's uncertainty in the marketplace, and where we need to, let's say, prepared for to be adaptive. Once thing happens, once things take longer, and let's say we need to deal with that within the next 12 to 24 months.
Okay, there are many questions based on sales forecast in the future. I take one from Mr. Kalt to all three panelists. The last years were dominated by long-term sales reduction proposals caused by car sharing and or reduced willingness to buy an own car by the young generations, as COVID-19 also has shown the advantages of a car, privacy, safety, no critical contacts in public transport, etc. Isn't there also a chance of long-term change in customer behavior due to a pandemic experience now? Do you see such a customer change?
I think our colleague from Wolfsburg must be closest at that point. Can you take that?
Yeah, I can take this. We see a little move back to an individual car, but the prognosis is it will not last long. We see that in some mega cities there is a problem of where to park. You must get the license plates in China, for example. All this is an ongoing trend in the world. And Corona will have only a small impact now on this, that it moves back from the sharing ideas to the individual car. So there is no big sales impact on this. The biggest sales impact will come from the different programs in the different countries, to be honest. That's where we see the biggest impact.
Totally agree, yeah.
There is a question for Professor Tostmann regarding electric cars. How do you think will the demand for electric vehicles develop over the next year and over the next 5 to 10 years, considering low oil prices? Is the subsidy of the German government sufficient to boost the demand for electric vehicles? What are the effects on the fulfillment of the required average fleet consumption in the EU?
Yeah, a lot of questions, but basically, first of all, I think the climate change and Corona, they have nothing to do. So therefore, there will be no impact from this actual crisis to the climate change which we have, and we are very aggressive with that. What we invest into battery vehicles, because we believe that at the moment there is no alternative available. Maybe in a couple of years with other technology, but for the time being, this is the answer when it comes to CO2-free mobility. So therefore, we see for the next year a growing demand, and especially when it comes to the next 5 to 10 years, when the infrastructure will be completely ready, so that the charging problem is completely solved. Then we will have huge demand for these cars. In the matured markets, Europe, China, US, in rural areas, for sure, there we see the ICIs for a longer time.
I have another question to all of you. The question from my side is, what was your biggest challenge in this crisis phase? Mr. Schlimper, what was your personal biggest challenge?
Thank you. The biggest challenge was all of a sudden the textile demand from the Chinese market was gone from one day to the other. We successfully managed to keep operations running, but then no orders. And this was the biggest challenge, because we are a very asset-intensive company, and then to come up with a plan of how to reduce output, that was a big challenge for us. It's not like you reduce your production without and you stop assembling. It's like to give you just a feeling. If you want to stop a line, it takes about 2 weeks of preparation to stop, and it's very cautious on environmental impact, and it's huge side effects on other lines we are running. So this was the big challenge. Okay,
Mr. Schäfer, your biggest challenge?
Well, I would mention 2 challenges. First of all, the challenge to handle, let's say, a group of companies with no revenues, and to keep liquidity and protect the cash. This was of sure everybody had to deal with, and we had to do as well. And let's say to survive this period of time. On the operational side, I would say, since nobody knew how long it took, and we heard it before and we know it today, how long it took to reopen the facilities. And let's say the planning numbers that we received were not really, let's say, reliable. When we first shut down, everybody thought latest after Easter, we will ramp up. To what numbers, nobody knew. And for us in the supply chain, it's always the highest, let's say, target or goal to supply parts and to be ready to ship whatever number is needed. And I think this uncertainty and this shifting of week, later, then not knowing exactly the demands, this made it, I would say, very challenging to be ready at the right time in order to support.
Andreas.
The biggest challenge was to implement a quick decision process globally within a couple of hours and days to coordinate the whole network. That was the biggest challenge. I said this earlier, the crisis was not a crisis, was one dimension. It's a crisis with a lot of dimensions coming from that people could get infected, that there was no distribution network, there was no supply network, nothing. So therefore, to coordinate this and make some decisions within the first hours, that was the biggest challenge.
The topic of our talk is, what are the consequences? So also a question from my side to all of you. What do you think are the main consequences? What will change in the future? And I don't mean home office and less flights and so on. I mean in the production and logistics structures or so on. Who will start?
Yeah, then I start, if I may. I think in production and logistics, there will be no big changes. It will now turn into a normal crisis situation where demand is dramatically reduced and where we hopefully see that we are back on track within a couple of months or a year from now. When it comes to the processes behind, I think we can learn a lot of this and to be very efficient with that, what we are doing, because we learned that sometimes it's not necessary to have 10 people around the table to make a decision. Sometimes it's 3 is enough. You need the right one. So therefore, the efficiency, I think, is one thing we take out of this.
Okay, Mr. Schäfer.
Well, I think the key word is efficiency. I spoke before on the impact on the balance sheets of all of us. And I think we are not working in an industry where we had, let's say, high margins or lots of money to spend. And this will this will not change with the crisis. It will get worse. So the pressure will get higher. You will not get a premium for anything, even worse. And you need to work on the efficiency. And when the crisis gives us, in terms of digitalization, that we don't travel for every meeting all the time, then this is already a small piece of efficiency, as Mr. Tostmann mentioned it before. In the operations, we need to do our job in order to stay flexible and even be more flexible in future, in order, let's say, to overcome, especially the next years until the vaccination is given.
Okay, Mr. Schlimbert.
For us, it's flexibility in operations. And we learned now for the very first time in history that we also stop lines and not produce on inventories. So we need to adapt to the market conditions in a very flexible way. The second thing is specialization, to continue the path to offer special products. And number three, we see now also with the restart that our branding is very important, that we deliver purpose to the people in terms of sustainability, environmental impact, and biodegradability, so that there is a choice for the people to contribute with their purchasing to a better world. And these three things will change tremendously in future. And we also hope that consumer behavior, and we see it already, will change in this direction.
I have to look on the time. As you may know, our MBA Automotive Industry is organized in cooperation with the Technical University in Bratislava, and we have my colleague Professor Lesinski over with us. And the last question is for Professor Lesinski. So if you can open your microphone, you can ask the question by yourself.
Yes, nice to meet you. You heard me?
Yes.
All is okay. I have here write my question. This biocrisis is not in the employment, not in the industry, not in society. This is crisis of individuals. How do you see that this is globally individuals' problem today? How do you see how we can optimism given to 15, 20 million people that they coming to our industry with successful as war 100 years, they invested to their, for example, education, to which type of education we must bringing to Europe, Japan, China, North America or South America, and how we given optimism to young people to follow seniors in this successful mechanical, electrical, metallurgical industries together in this very nice product. We are school, and this is very important answer for this very important MBA study.
So what is your question to?
My question is, which strategy change a producer or managers for their employment to successful coming back to this industrial production? We have problem with tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, not with people, not with machines. This is problem today. Started once more to big productivity. How managers or owners coming invited to this very changeable situation? Production is optimistic and optimum. Logistic is optimistic and optimum. And how we invited people to this. This is not robotics in the future only.
So, Andreas, how do you get the right people for the future?
Nice to hear you, Dr. Tostmann.
Yeah, nice to hear from you as well. Yeah, in general, I think the industry will change now. We see this, that from the traditional way how we developed and produced cars, the market will change and the product will change as well. The battery vehicle is just another drivetrain, but the connected car combined with the battery vehicle is a completely different challenge to that what we had, let's say, 5 to 10 years ago in the market. And that means that we need different skills and different programs for the young, talented people. We need more of process engineers. We need more of people who are closely involved in digitalization to have or to make this change happen with the products, and as well then with the production of this product. For example, our cloud system, what I mentioned earlier on, we need roughly 80 to 100 people from the market to run this, purely because in our own company we do not have the experts for such a thing, and that is a field where education can do a lot. Just the change of product and industry, what we see, not only in the automobile industry, also in other industries as well.
Mr. Schäfer, as a spokesman of the supplier here in Austria, do you think that the automotive and supply industry will be interesting for young people also in the future?
Well, I will do everything that I can in order to empathize and make people interested in this part of, let's say, education and to work with us. As Mr. Tostmann say, there will be changes, of course, but it will still stay. Mobility will be a big issue. It will have a lot of, let's say, interesting fields. They might change. But as well, with the new car concepts, mechanical engineering and electrical engineering will be as needed as it is today. Maybe it shifts a little bit, but never forget, we are working in a very competitive environment. What makes, let's say, work interesting to work on such products and the challenges given through the industry. And I don't see a sudden change on that, and at least not due to the pandemic corona crisis.
Okay, thank you very much to all our speakers. I have to stop our very interesting discussion just now. We will collect your questions you write down in the chat. We will hand it over to our speakers, and Dr. Hahn will provide you with the answers so that you will get answer also to your question if this is possible. So once again, thank you very much to Mr. Schlimpert, Mr. Schäfer, and Mr. Tostmann. Thanks for having you with us. All the best for the very interesting times we are facing now. It will be changing times. It will be hard times, critical times. But of course, it will be a very interesting time. Thank you very much. Have a good time. All the best, and all the best to all our participants. Take care. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.